about a year and a half ago, I shot a scene where that hole 2 is on this disc golf course. You can kind of see what they call it, a hole, right? Disc stopper, catcher, I don't know. Anyway, but I'm back here now, and I remember I was shooting the video there. I was like, there's 80 hours left until deadline, like May 20th. Well, May 20th our time, but that was a big thing. It was like May 21st at sunrise in Japan, which is May 20th at 2:33 p.m. Central Time in Texas. But I was shooting the video here a couple days before that. And now I'm back a year and a half later, putting the finishing touches on the book. I was just reading through it, and I gotta say, I can't even put my mind in. I try sometimes to put myself in the frame of mind before this entire journey happened, and like what my sort of paradigm about the world or whatever, and God and all that stuff was before. And I can't do it. It's described in Revelation really well. It said, it's a door that when it's open, no man shutteth. And that door has been open since March 13th of last year, even before the May 21st deadline. And it hasn't closed since then, and I don't know what it would feel like to go back. You would have to convince yourself that everything you experienced was false and that God doesn't exist, or an active God doesn't exist. You have to come up with some new version of it. And all the weird coincidences and the sort of simulation game you were involved in during your journey, you'd have to discard. You'd have to totally re-engage in, as it's called, Babylon in Revelation, but just our sort of geopolitical, socioeconomic systems. And I don't know, I feel it fucking sounds miserable. But anyway, so I find myself here a year and a half later, a couple days after Thanksgiving, and I notice this pretty badass tree covered in Spanish moss. But I walked by that actually, it wasn't that hole. It was a different one. It was the next one up, actually. But I walked by it, both of these, and I was thinking about how, where I was at then. I had no book. I didn't know what was going to happen on the deadline of the 21st. I had no money, and I didn't know what the fuck I was going to do. And now, I'm a couple weeks away probably from finishing or publishing the book, sending it off to my friend, the Archer. And I try to read the book, and I'm like, well, just James, I'm telling myself, put yourself in in your shoes before this whole journey started. Like, you just sit down and you start reading a book. What would that feel like? And I can't do it. Basically I would have to say, it wouldn't be that I would put myself in a frame of mind that God doesn't exist, because at that point I hadn't really thought, like I knew in my mind, I believed God existed, but never spent any time at all going through, reasons why, or exploring reasons why he exists. It was here. No, it was there. That one. It wasn't part. Hole 3. It was this one right over here. Maybe I can recreate the shot. Yeah, it wasn't that one. But I'm thinking like it would basically be going back to the frame of mind of, I haven't really thought about this before. God's not necessarily like a being that I think about, and I would have to get myself there and say to myself, okay, now read the book and see what happens. You know, how do you react to it? I think it was like this. It was like, there's 80 hours left. What's it gonna be? You know, or maybe it was like this. It's like, there's 80 hours left. What's it gonna be? Man, I've come a long way in an hour, or in a year and a half. But anyway, you know, how does someone react? And I wish, I would like to have, it would be great to just be able to see a recording of someone read it and ask them questions. Like, I wish I could just ride shotgun in their brain as they react to it and just take notes. You know, how is this person reacting to this? Can anyone even get through the book? It's such a short book. It's only 55,000 words. It's like twice the length of fucking Old Man and the Sea, and you know, a tiny novella. It's like double a tiny novella. It's barely a novel. I think I don't know if novellas are from 30,000 to 60,000 words, or if they cut off at 50,000 words, but mine's at 55,000. It's like either a short novel, you know, a very short novel, or like a longer novella, but it's somewhere in there. The thing is, it's the you know, it's the footage that's involved in the book. It's really only a 3-hour read, 3 hour and 15-minute read. You can knock that out in an afternoon. But when you incorporate the, you know, footage that is throughout the book, it adds another 6 hours to it, as it stands now. So I'm like, you know, thinking about that. I mean, is someone gonna spend 9 hours reading a book? I mean, if it were that's the equivalent of it being 150,000 words. Which, if it were just a 150,000 word book, someone would spend 9 hours reading it, right? But with the footage, it's either, you know, makes it more palatable. Like, someone would have a better experience with a 55,000 word book with video footage in it than a 150,000 page or 150,000 word book without video footage, you know. And for me, I don't know. I mean, I'm not used to reading a book and then clicking on a fucking link at the end of a chapter and then watching some footage ranging from a few seconds, you know, maybe 45, 50 seconds, all the way up to 2 hours if it's the movie that premieres, the film that's screened inside the book. I don't know. Ideally, someone just picks it up, begins reading, and anytime they see a link, they touch, you know, they click the link and watch whatever pops up. But of course, if you're reading a book and you click a link and it's a movie that's 2 hours and 1 minute, are you going to watch that movie? I don't know. The way Revelation, I mean, I know it's going to happen. I know it'll be digested. But the way Revelation's written, everyone's going to read the book or see the footage. So I don't have to think about it. This is that field I was at last time, a year and a half ago. It's crazy being here. It's also interesting having my my mom and my here with my grandmother and my brother and my aunt, my great aunt, because hearing them interact and, you know, their conversations and thinking about their names, which is an important part of the book. You know, my grandmother's name means sea of bitterness, and my mom's name means serpent. And hearing them talk to one another, you would never, without the book, you wouldn't think that a name would be relevant. It's like, oh, well, she could be named anything. But because there's an active God involved, and this is popping off in 2019, going into 2020, because the book has been written. As a result, there's been active planning around the entire fucking world preparing for this book. So 60 years ago, See, that's another interesting thing too. But 60 years ago, were all the Maries on the earth strategically planned so that, you know, there's millions of Maries, right? Which means sea of bitterness. And if you think of each of them who have that name as having that name on purpose, then every Marie on the planet serves a function in a local story to unlock heaven. Every single Marie is the sea of bitterness character or the sea of bitterness piece on a chessboard or a game board, and they're the sea of bitterness related to all the other units or characters or names on that local board. So I guess an easier way to put that is, if you know someone named Marie, they're the sea of bitterness character in your life. And it relates to you and all the other your name and everyone else's name in your life. And you can see how they're the sea of bitterness unit or character or chess piece on the game board. And you can say, oh, that's the sea of bitterness character, and relate it to yourself via the book, via my book. Or if, let's say, someone else writes a book and you know them or they're more connected to you, you can see how your Marie relates to you through that other book. You see that? And what my story is just a first reference point to say this is this is a reference point related to all the people in my life, so you can see how the names relate to my story. And then if you look at each of them, they have a bunch of people, myself included, but they have other people in their lives with names, and they're the reference point through my story. And then someone that they're attached to has, you know, may not be directly like connected to my story, but they're connected to the intermediary. And you can kind of start to arrange everyone's function based off their name globally, like a 6 degrees of separation sort of situation. But that concept right there, you can't just be like, oh yeah, everyone's name is their function, because you don't have a reference point to start. But when you have that first reference point, i.e. me and my story, you know, the things that were looked at as good and bad in them, then all of a sudden, every name unlocks related to my story. And then as I unlock their names, then all of those people can look at all the other names in their lives, and they're the reference point that echoes my reference point. And it just keeps going and go, you know, and 6 degrees later, you've touched everyone in the world. So, I don't know. Thinking about that. And I don't know, I was kind of pissed off. Not pissed off, but just like, I don't know. I know that I'm going to take a bunch of shit for this. I definitely know that, from family, friends, strangers, fanatics, everyone. Because what this story does is it my story conflicts with billions of people's versions of what they expect, of their expectations on the most sensitive subject, you know, the dearest topic to them, which is God. So I imagine, you know, someone who's like a staunch conservative, heavy, like Bible thumping Jesus freak who reads the story, wouldn't even get through it, which is like a big problem in When it comes to the heaven, to heaven as I understand it, being the reference point to kick the fucking thing off, my concept of heaven conflicts with that person's concept of heaven, so much so that they're not going to get through the book. They'll just put it down and shut down. And I want to articulate this the right way, or articulate this so it's understandable. And they shut down. Now, if I turned my brain off when I encountered a concept that was new on my journey to get to the point where I've written the book, I never would have written the book. I would have been knocked out of my journey by God, because I wouldn't be telling his story. I'd be telling my story. And all I can do is speak from my experience, which says you're going to have to exercise. What worked for me was exercising my mental muscle, not actual brain, brain, not that muscle, but just like you're exercising it's like a mental process where even though you encounter something that just seems like totally unexpected, as you push through, you're rewarded because you're adjusting your expectation of God and salvation and the redemption and all that to what it actually is. Of course, it makes it sound like I'm trying to shove that down your throat by saying, well, it's my way and your way's wrong. When in fact, I guess my book and footage and channel is a series of adjustments as I figure out what his plan actually is, which is totally different than the plan that I had in mind, or the idea of heaven or God or whatever that I had in my mind before I started this journey. And I have proof of the adjustments that I've made because I recorded the whole fucking journey of my adjustments. Whereas someone reading the book the first time doesn't have a history of adjusting their mental thinking or their thinking. So by shutting the book before they do so, they're not, like, in their mind, their way's right. So, which in effect would mean that they're omniscient, which in effect is them playing God. That's the way I look at it. And I think the defense is, well, but it's based off Scripture. Well, it's based off your interpretation of Scripture, and I'm not gives a shit about getting in an argument. My book explains how you can see the face of God. No Scripture explains how you can see the face of God. And what I do to unlock that is interpret Scripture one way. Put it all together one way and say, here's how it's done. And that doesn't just mean once you read the book, then you next get to see the face of God, although it gives you a good head start. And then it's about here's another tricky part. It's not tricky, it's just unexpected based off all Scripture, or I get not even all Scripture, but just, Christian teaching and shit like that, is that in the book of Revelation, it's unique in that it says your works do follow you. And that's what's going to get you to see the face of God, because it's a seal of your journey. It's saying, oh yeah, you adjusted, you admitted all the stuff you've done, all the mistakes you've made on your journey, you've made adjustments, and you've recorded it, and you can present it to the world, but unless you see God's face, you haven't been sealed. Your story isn't endorsed by God. The only stories that are endorsed by God are sealed by God via, seeing his face, which is Moses he described it as a flaming sword, which is like, it's a spiritual sword that knocks you in the fucking head, and your vision pixelates because you get your burning bush. That's why he said flaming sword. It wasn't an actual sword. It's his way of describing what's separating you from paradise, and that's seeing the face of God, receiving your burning bush, which you're never going to get any other way that's ever been described in 2,000 years. Fuck, it's never been described ever in a how-to process, because you've never seen the face of God, nor has anyone else who's interpreted scripture their way. I've seen the face of God and wrote it in a fucking book, and I'm giving it away to the world for free. The question is, can you fucking read it without shutting down? And another thing I'm going to have to deal with is that that there's going to be certain people who read the book and look at it as on such a myopic level that says, nope, shut down. This isn't how I expect, without even acknowledging that's what's happening. Or it's going to be one of these maneuvers. Nope, that's wrong. Shut down. And in fact, when other people adopt and adopt the method within the book and begin to see the face of God, people who've shut down are going to look at that as not only wrong, but also an act of most likely a demonic Satan, whatever. Like, I'm going to be looked at as the Antichrist to some people. And the true Antichrist will be looked at as the Messiah. And that'll be the final test of humanity. Because my story involves sex, drugs, rock and roll, just partying. I mean, that's the kind of shit that has been taught to be of devil's work. But I admit the only reason you know it is because I told you the truth. In my book. I didn't hide anything, because you can't lie and be the Messiah. It's part of being the Messiah, is telling the truth, you see. And the liar, the Antichrist, isn't admitting to all the shit he's ever done, so he looks more messianic than the actual Messiah. And there's the test. So the workaround is to get people who haven't actually seen the face of God to see the face of God, who don't have the crappy background like I do, filled with sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Once they see it, then you're going to notice, oh wait, I see, aha, everyone's invited to heaven. It's not just the people who were good Christians. Good Christians, i.e. people who, avoided things like sex, drugs, and rock and roll. When in fact, I am just the first fruit. And when other people see the face of God, then it'll just be like, oh yeah, that's how it works. Anyone can do this, but they got to tell the truth. And they actually have to record their journey of doing so. So there's like that component too. Basically, another way to put it is, the entire universe in terms of life is empty. We're on an arc floating in space, orbiting around the sun and all that shit, but we're floating in space. And because we're all stuck together on the same ship, we're all stuck together on the same ship. It's not like I can just hop away and be like, well, fuck everyone, like I'll just go out into the forest or some shit like that. You don't get away from this. We all have to deal with it at the same time. So, there's the rub. But yes, I'm thinking about these things, but I'm doing so back in South Carolina, which the last time I was here, I was talking about, there's 80 hours left. But that's all in the book too, so I don't know. We'll see what happens. I figure as long as one person reads it who's sensible, or like who's young, They'll be like, oh, that's how it works, and they'll tell all their friends, and then and then they'll take their time working through it. But it's like, how do you get it so? How do you present it so someone actually gets through all of it, including the footage? It takes 9 hours to read or to read a 55,000 word book. So that's where I'm at. I think about these things.